Have you ever wondered who first decided that clothing could be more than just a cover for the body, that it could speak, express, and define who we are? Long before catwalk sewing machines or Paris fashion weeks, there were humans, huddled around fires, wearing animal skin stitched with bone needles. What started as mere survival soon became something much deeper, a form of identity. Thousands of years ago, ancient humans began decorating their garments not out of need, but out of desire to stand out, to belong, or to tell a story. In Africa, beadwork and patterns told tales of tribes and rank. In Egypt, linen became a sign of purity and wealth. In China, silk was spun so fine it shimmered like sunlight, and only the elite could wear it. Fashion was born the moment people realized clothes could speak without words. It was no longer about warmth or protection. It was about expression. But who made the first true fashion designer? Was it the tailor who dressed pharaohs? Or the weaver who crafted garments fit for gods? The answer lies deep in history, where creativity met culture and a new world of beauty began to unfold. What if I told you that the world's first runway wasn't made of glossy marble, but of desert sand, and the models were pharaohs, queens, and high priests? Welcome to ancient Egypt, around 3000 BC. Where fashion wasn't just about looking beautiful, but about declaring power, divinity, and status. The Egyptians were among the first people to view clothing as art. They spun fine linen from flax, bleached it to glowing white, and shaped it into elegant tunics and pleated gowns. Every fold, every thread, had meaning. Jewelry sparkled like the Nile under the sun. Gold, lapis lazuli, turquoise, each piece telling a story of the gods they worshipped and the lives they led. Even perfumes and makeup became fashion accessories, completing the image of grace and glory. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, another kind of beauty emerged. Their garments were made from wool, carefully woven and often layered into fringed skirts and draped cloaks. Here, clothes represented more than wealth. They symbolized innovation. The Mesopotamians created some of the first looms, setting the foundation for the textile industry itself. These early societies understood something profound. Fashion could shape identity. A king's robe wasn't just fabric. It was a statement of divinity. A priestess's veil wasn't just modesty. It was mystery and power. It was here, in the heat of the desert, in the heart of early cities, that fashion began to whisper something new, that how you looked could tell the world who you were meant to be. In ancient Greece, fashion wasn't stitched or sewn. It was sculpted. Flowing fabrics like the chiton and himation were wrapped and draped around the body with breathtaking simplicity, yet held profound meaning. Greeks believed beauty and harmony should mirror the perfection of a human form. Their garments followed this belief, elegant, balanced, and free. Clothing became a symbol of the mind. Philosophers, poets, and artists all embraced minimalism. Their attire reflected calm thought and inner grace. White signified purity. Dyed fabrics were for the rich and powerful. And though there were no fashion designers as we know them, Greek artisans began experimenting with texture, flow, and form, creating what we might call early couture. Then came ancient Rome, where luxury met law. Romans loved excess. Silks from China, fine wools from Spain, dyed fabrics from the East. The color purple was reserved for emperors and senators, a color so rare it was worth more than gold. Their fashion wasn't just art, it was authority. Tailors and cloth merchants began to rise in social importance. They weren't merely workers, they were creators of identity. For the first time, fashion had both status and structure. From the calm elegance of Greece to the bold splendor of Rome, the idea of fashion began to evolve, not only as expression but as power. Because in those ancient streets, what you wore could define not only who you were, but how history would remember you. Imagine walking into a medieval castle. Torches flickering, knights clanking in armor, and noble women gliding through halls in gowns that shimmer like moonlight. But here's the secret. Fashion in the Middle Ages wasn't just about beauty, it was about control. During the medieval era, 5th to 15th century, what you wore spoke louder than your name. The church, the crown, and the class system all used fashion to separate the powerful from the poor. Fine silks, velvets, and furs were reserved for royalty and nobility. Commoners by law. were forbidden to wear certain fabrics or colors, a system known as sumptuary laws. Your clothing could literally get you punished if it was too rich for your status. But despite the restrictions, creativity bloomed. Noble tailors and seamstresses began designing by hand for individual clients, cutting, shaping, and stitching garments to flatter the human form. It was the birth of custom design. Women's gowns became long and elegant, with tight corsets and flowing sleeves that brushed the floor. Men wore tunics and hose, with padded shoulders to appear broader and more commanding. Every detail, embroidery, lace, even buttons, symbolized wealth and influence. Meanwhile, the Silk Road connected Europe to Asia, flooding the continent with exotic fabrics, patterns, and dyes. For the first time, global fashion trade was born, and clothing began to travel faster than cultures could. Fashion had officially stepped out of survival and into sophistication. In candlelit chambers and royal courts, one question echoed louder than any prayer. Who made her gown? Because now the maker, the designer, was becoming as important as the one who wore it. What happens when the world rediscovers beauty, color, and creativity all at once? Welcome to the Renaissance, 14th to 17th century, the era that transformed not only art and science but fashion itself. For centuries, people had dressed for power or survival, but now they dress for expression. The human body became a masterpiece, and clothing, its frame. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo painted figures draped in textures so rich they inspired real garments. Painters influenced tailors, and tailors began to think like artists. In Italy and France, fashion exploded into a spectacle of luxury. Women wore gowns with intricate embroidery, layered skirts, and jeweled bodices. Men flaunted puff sleeves, velvet cloaks, and ornate collars. Every piece told a story of wealth, intellect, and taste. But something revolutionary was happening behind the scenes, the birth of the fashion designer. For the first time, royal courts had personal tailors who didn't just make clothes, they designed them. Each garment was created to reflect personality, power, and prestige. The designer became both an artist and an architect, shaping how people presented themselves to the world. Florence, Venice, and Paris emerged as Europe's fashion capitals. And as printing spread, so did fashion sketches, early lookbooks that allowed people across continents to imitate the styles of the elite. Fashion was no longer confined to palaces. It was becoming a global language of art. The Renaissance taught humanity one timeless truth. Clothing could capture not just your body, but your spirit. What if one man's obsession with luxury could change the way the whole world dressed? Enter King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, a ruler so fascinated by beauty, extravagance, and grandeur that he turned fashion into political power. During his reign in the 17th century, France didn't just lead armies, it led style. Louis understood something revolutionary. The way people dressed could strengthen his rule. He made fashion the heartbeat of his court of Versailles, where every gown, wig, and jeweled shoe glittered beneath golden chandeliers. Nobles competed fiercely to impress him, not with words, but with outfits. He famously declared, "Fashion is the mirror of power." Tailors, milliners, embroiderers, and shoemakers flourished under royal patronage. The king even established guilds, early forms of fashion unions, to ensure only the finest craftsmen could create garments for the elite. This structure gave birth to the professional fashion industry. Under Louis XIV, Paris became the center of world fashion. French silk, lace, and embroidery were exported across Europe, setting trends from London to Madrid. For the first time, people began looking to France for what was in and out. Women's gowns grew wider, stiffer, and more decorative, while men's coats became masterpieces of tailoring, trimmed, buttoned, and layered with precision. Fashion had become theater, and everyone wanted a role on the stage. This was the beginning of fashion as influence, the idea that clothing could project power, politics, and prestige all at once. Louis XIV didn't just build Versailles, he built the foundation of modern fashion culture. What happens when fashion becomes too powerful? So powerful it can topple a crown. In the 18th century, France was still the world's fashion capital, and at its glittering heart stood Queen Marie Antoinette, the ultimate fashion icon of her time. Every gown she wore, every ribbon she chose, every hairstyle she unveiled, sent shockwaves through Europe. Marie Antoinette wasn't just a queen, She was a trendsetter. She transformed fashion into a weapon of attention, influence, and sometimes controversy. With the help of her personal designer, Rose Bertin, she became the first royal to have something close to a fashion stylist. Bertin was nicknamed the Minister of Fashion. Together, they built a legacy of creativity and excess that would define a century. The Queen's towering powdered wigs, sometimes over 3 feet high, were decorated with feathers, jewels, even miniature ships. Her dresses were made from the finest silks and adorned with lace, pearls, and embroidery. Every ball was a runway, every portrait a campaign. But outside the palace walls, people were starving, and as the gowns grew bigger, the anger grew louder. Her luxury became a symbol of inequality, and soon whispers turned into revolution. Yet, even as the French Revolution erupted, Marie Antoinette's influence refused to die. She had helped transform clothing from a sign of nobility into a statement of personality. After her fall, Europe began to crave simplicity again. The extravagant gowns disappeared, replaced by elegance, comfort, and natural beauty, a quiet rebellion against the world she once ruled. Still, her legacy endured. For the first time in history, the world saw how fashion could define and destroy power. What if I told you that the hum of a sewing machine changed fashion more than any king or queen ever could? The Industrial Revolution, 18th to 19th century, was more than an era of iron and steam. It was the birth of modern fashion. Before this time, clothing was handmade, slow, and expensive. But as machines began to roar in factories, something incredible happened. Fashion became faster, cheaper, and available to everyone. The invention of the spinning jenny, power loom, and sewing machine transformed how fabric was made and stitched. What once took days could now be done in hours. Cotton mills multiplied. Dyes became brighter and more durable, and entire cities like Manchester and London turned into textile empires. For the first time, ordinary people could afford stylish clothes. Fashion stepped down from the thrones of royalty and into the streets. Women wore factory-made dresses, men embraced ready-to-wear suits, and department stores began to emerge, changing how people shop forever. But behind the glitter of progress was a harsh truth. Factories demanded endless labor, and young women worked long hours in dangerous conditions to create the garments that fueled the new world of style. Meanwhile, fashion capitals like Paris adapted, leading the transformation. Designers began to combine artistry with mass production, balancing creativity and commerce. This was when the idea of fashion as both business and art truly began to take shape. The needle and thread had been replaced by gears and steel, but the dream of beauty never stopped spinning. From palace gowns to factory seams, fashion had finally become for the people. What if every stitch you wore told the world exactly who you were? Your class, your virtue, even your secrets. Welcome to Victorian era, 1837 to 1901. Named after Queen Victoria, whose reign defined not just a nation, but an entire way of dressing. This was the age when fashion became a reflection of strict morals, social rules, and silent statements. Women's fashion reached new heights of complexity, literally. Corsets tightened waists to unnatural sizes, creating the iconic hourglass silhouette. Gigantic crinolines and layered skirts swept across ballrooms, while lace gloves and high collars whispered modesty and refinement. Every outfit was carefully constructed to express grace, discipline, and respectability. Men, too, adopted a sharp, dignified look. Tailored coats, crisp waistcoats, and top hats became symbols of ambition and honor. The gentleman's suit was born, setting a standard that still shapes modern menswear. But beneath the polished surface, the world was changing fast. Industrialization had made clothing more accessible than ever. Middle-class families could now dress like the elite, and fashion magazines began spreading across Europe and America, showcasing the latest trends and silhouettes. For the first time, the world saw fashion journalism, illustrated catalogs, sketches, and advice columns that brought Parisian style to women's doorsteps. Still, not everyone admired the tight corsets and endless fabric layers. Quietly, voices began to rise, calling for comfort, movement, and freedom. Among them were the early dress reformers, who believed women deserved clothing that let them breathe. The Victorian era gave fashion its rules, but also planted the seeds of rebellion that would soon rewrite them. Because fashion, like time, never stands still. What happens when a generation decides to break every rule their parents lived by, including how they dressed? The early 20th century was an age of rebellion, courage, and transformation. After centuries of tight corsets and heavy gowns, women began to crave freedom, not just in society, but in style. And out of that craving came a new kind of designer, one who believed fashion could liberate, not restrain. Her name was Coco Chanel. In the 1910s and 1920s, Chanel changed everything. She threw away corsets, introduced loose silhouettes, and made comfort fashionable. She popularized jersey fabric, once considered too plain, turning it into elegance itself. Her designs, the little black dress, pearls, and sleek suits, redefined what it meant to be feminine. At the same time, World War I and II reshaped fashion dramatically. With men at war, women entered factories and offices, wearing trousers and practical uniforms for the first time. Fashion adapted to survival. Simple, durable, efficient. And when peace returned, so did creativity. The roaring 1920s exploded with energy. Flapper dresses shimmered with sequins and fringe. Women cut their hair short, and jazz became the soundtrack of rebellion. Fashion wasn't just clothing anymore. It was attitude. Designers like Jean Patou, Madeline Vinet, and Elsa Schiaparelli began experimenting with structure, art, and surrealism. The runway had become a playground for imagination. For the first time in history, fashion and freedom walked hand in hand. What had begun as a whisper in ancient times, the desire to express oneself through clothing, was now a global roar. What if clothes could make you feel like royalty, even if you weren't born one? Welcome to the golden age of couture, 1940s, 1950s, a time when fashion rose from the ashes of war and bloomed into elegance, confidence, and pure artistry. The world was healing, and people craved beauty again. Paris, scarred but unbroken, reclaimed its throne as the heart of global style. Then came Christian Dior. In 1947, Dior unveiled his revolutionary new look. It featured nipped-in waists, full skirts, and soft shoulders, a silhouette that celebrated femininity after years of wartime austerity. It wasn't just clothing, it was hope stitched into fabric. Women around the world embraced the return of grace, glamour, and abundance. Dior's success reignited haute couture, the art designing custom, handcrafted garments for the elite. But he wasn't alone. Balenciaga perfected structure and precision. Hubert de Givenchy brought youth and elegance. Coco Chanel now returned to fashion, revived her timeless simplicity. Each house became a temple of design, and the designers, its high priests. Models became muses, and runways turned into dreams made visible. The Atelier's fashion workshops, buzzed with artisans hand-sewing beads, lace, and embroidery, one dress sometimes taking hundreds of hours to complete. Meanwhile, Hollywood joined the movement. Stars like Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, and Grace Kelly brought couture to cinema screens, making fashion global. For the first time, everyone from Paris to New York to Lagos wanted to look like the stars. Fashion had become more than fabric. It was fantasy, identity, and aspiration. This was the age when designers didn't just make clothes, they made legends. What happens when the next generation decides they're done dressing like their parents? The 1960s and 1970s were more than just decades. They were revolutions. Music, art, and culture collided. And for the first time, youth became the world's style leaders. Fashion was no longer dictated by royalty or couture houses. It was born in the streets, in rock concerts, and on the dance floor. Gone were the stiff corsets and long skirts of the past. In came the miniskirt, the bold prints, and the go-go boots. Designers like Mary Kwan and André Correges introduced bright colors, geometric cuts, and futuristic materials. The message was loud and clear. Fashion was about fun, rebellion, and freedom. London became the epicenter of cool, swinging London, they called it, while Paris tried to catch up with the youthful energy that was reshaping the world. Music icons like the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin inspired how people dress, blurring the line between performer and audience. Then came the 1970s, a decade of contrast. From the disco lights of New York Studio 54 to the earthy tones of the hippie movement. Flared pants, Platform shoes, leather jackets, and flowing bohemian dresses became the new uniforms of self-expression. Fashion had officially broken free. Designers like Yves Saint Laurent captured this transformation perfectly. He shocked the world by putting women in tuxedos, redefining power and femininity. Meanwhile, Vivienne Westwood introduced punk, a raw, rebellious style that screamed attitude and individuality. The 60s and 70s taught the world that fashion wasn't just something you wore, it was something you were. Every outfit became a statement. Every color, a shout of freedom. What happens when fashion stops being just art and becomes an empire? Welcome to 1980s and 1990s, the era when fashion wasn't just worn, it was worshipped. This was the age of shoulder pads, power suits, and runways that looked more like rock concerts. Fashion had entered its boldest chapter yet, where attitude, wealth, and image ruled the world. The 1980s were all about power dressing. As more women entered corporate spaces, their clothes became symbols of authority. Strong shoulders, sharp tailoring, and statement colors screamed confidence. Designers like Giorgio Armani, Gianni Versace, and Donna Karan crafted looks that made people feel unstoppable. At the same time, luxury brands began turning into global identities. The logos of Gucci, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton became symbols of success, the new crown jewels of modern life. Advertising was no longer about selling clothes. It was about selling a lifestyle. And then the supermodels arrived. Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Claudia Schiffer, and Kate Moss became household names. Not just faces of fashion, but icons of beauty and influence. Runways turned electric. Magazines became cultural Bibles, and fashion shows transformed into global spectacles. The 1990s shifted again, from glamour to minimalism. Designers like Calvin Klein and Helmut Lang embraced simplicity, while Versace kept the fire of extravagance alive. Streetwear also began its quiet revolution, hinting that fashion's next big wave would rise from the people, not just a runway. Technology, media, and celebrity all collided, turning fashion into a worldwide conversation. For the first time, what you wore could make you famous. Fashion wasn't just an industry anymore. It was the culture. What if the future of fashion isn't made of fabric, but of imagination? Welcome to the 21st century, where the runway has no borders, and fashion belongs to everyone. The story that began with animal skins and hand-woven cloth has evolved into a world of innovation, inclusivity, and boundless creativity. The early 2000s celebrated celebrity culture, red carpets, reality shows, and designer collaborations with pop icons. But as technology advanced, fashion began to live online. The internet turned every screen into a runway, and social media made influencers the new fashion voices. Then came the revolution no one could ignore: sustainability. As fast fashion exploded, so did awareness of its cost to people and the planet. A new generation of designers began reimagining fashion with purpose, recycling fabrics, embracing ethical production, and designing not just for beauty, but for balance. Technology took the stage too. 3D printing, virtual fitting rooms, and AI-assisted design opened doors once thought impossible. Digital fashion, clothing that exists only in virtual worlds, began merging art, gaming, and creativity. The metaverse became a new runway, where imagination had no limits. Most importantly, fashion became inclusive. Diversity in race, size, gender, and culture took center stage. The industry finally began reflecting the real world, not an idealized version of it. Traditional beauty standards started to fade, replaced by the celebration of individuality. From the bone needles of prehistory to the algorithms of today, fashion has always been more than cloth and color. It is the story of humanity itself, our creativity, our rebellion, our dreams. And the thread that began thousands of years ago is still being woven by every designer, every artist, and every person who dares to express themselves. The thread of time continues because fashion never ends. The world had seen needles, looms, and machines, but no one was ready for this new designer, one that didn't have hands but code. The 21st century whispered a new era, where creativity met algorithms. Designers no longer just sketched on paper. They programmed dreams into screens. Runways turned digital, and fabrics became pixels before they became reality. Imagine a dress designed by artificial intelligence, woven from imagination and mathematics, modeled by avatars on virtual catwalks seen by millions online. Fashion was no longer bound by fabric or form. It lived in data and breathed through artificial minds. And yet, a question lingered. Can technology truly capture the soul of fashion? Or does the thread of creativity still belong to human hands? After the glitter of AI and digital catwalks, something shifted. The world began to see the cost, not just in money, but in Earth's tears. Mountains of discarded clothes. Rivers turned gray from dyes. And the hands that sewed our beauty were calloused, unseen and forgotten. From this silence rose a new generation. Young designers with fierce compassion. They didn't ask, what's trending? They asked, what's right? Garments were reborn from recycled fabrics. Dyes came from plants, not poisons. Runways spoke about hope, change, and responsibility. Fashion began to heal, not just the planet, but its own soul. And as the green movement grew, one question echoed through every design studio and factory. Can fashion still be beautiful if it isn't kind? Because this time, the fashion wasn't just about style. It was about conscience. Fashion once belonged to a few, royal courts, glossy magazines, and powerful runways. But in this new age, the world became the runway. From hand-woven fabrics of Africa to the intricate embroidery of India, the minimalist beauty of Japan, and the bold colors of Latin America, every stitch began to tell a story. Designers no longer copied trends. They collaborated with traditions. Old craftswomen in small villages became mentors to young designers in big cities. Runways celebrated every skin tone, every heritage, every accent. It was no longer about Western fashion. It was world fashion. Culture became couture. And as the lights shone on models of all backgrounds, one truth became clear. The future of fashion wasn't about who wore it best, but who was finally seen. In this part of history, fashion didn't just decorate the world, it connected it. Once upon a time, fashion lived on glossy magazine pages and grand Paris runways. But then it jumped onto screens. Small ones, bright ones, and suddenly, everyone had a front row seat. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the new fashion capitals of the world. No invitations, no velvet ropes, just creativity, a camera, and confidence. Teenagers in bedrooms became global trendsetters. Streetwear designers outsold luxury brands. And one viral post could build or break an empire overnight. Fashion became democratized. You didn't need money, fame, or connections. Just vision, passion, and a phone with good lighting. But as likes turned to pressure and trends changed by the hour, a new question rose from behind the filters. Are we expressing ourselves or just chasing the algorithm? Because in this digital age, fashion wasn't just worn, it was performed. And the runway? It now fit in the palm of your hand. For centuries, fashion told society what to wear. But now, people began telling fashion who they were. No longer just fabric on skin. Every outfit became a statement, a mood, a rebellion, a dream. The girl in rainbow sneakers wasn't just chasing a trend. She was claiming her identity. The man in a skirt wasn't defying rules. He was defining freedom. And the woman wearing a hijab on a global runway wasn't asking for space. She was taking it. From gender-fluid collections to body-positive campaigns, fashion started speaking every language of being human. It wasn't about fitting in anymore. It was about standing out for the right reasons. And the world listened. Because when fabric meets truth, fashion stops being clothing and becomes courage. The story of fashion began with survival, animal skins and bone needles under the stars. It became expression, colors, patterns, symbols of power and love. And today, it stands at the edge of imagination itself. The runway is no longer a place. It's everywhere. From the screens in our palms to the virtual worlds we build. Fashion now lives in pixels, dreams, and code. AI designs what human hands once drew. Robots stitch what hearts once sewed. 3D printers build dresses from air, and fabrics can change color with a thought. But even with all the brilliance of machines, Fashion's truest beauty still lies where it began, in human emotion, because behind every thread there's a story. A designer sketching through heartbreak, a mother sewing for her child's future, a village artisan weaving heritage into cloth. The future of fashion isn't just about innovation, it's about intention. It's about designing not only what we wear, but why we wear it. We'll see fabrics grown from plants, dresses that power themselves, and jewelry made from recycled stars. Or so it feels. Sparkles. Fashion houses will collaborate across continents in real time. Cultural exchange will become creation, not imitation. But as humanity evolves, one question remains. Will we use fashion to impress the world or to express the soul? Because the next era isn't just about what's on the outside. It's about the stories we dare to tell through every thread we wear. Fashion started with a single needle in ancient hands. And now it ends where it began, with imagination.